Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. Two 13-year-olds hand themselves into police after a massive fire gutted a heritage building in Sydney. A Northland garage owner says he's seen more than 40 cars damaged by potholes in local roads. So who should foot the bill? A $50 Pack and Save voucher for a COVID jab. A community healthcare provider's bribe to get people vaccinated before winter. Free Crocs and electronics, but at what cost? Concerns are raised about data collection by the online e-commerce site Temu. He's the first Pacific Islander to win American Idol. We speak to 18-year-old Ian Thongi, and the lucky pooch who loves swimming so much, he's got his own indoor pool. Lucky pooch, right? Check us out, Freeview, Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. A journalist who passed on critical evidence pointing to Alan Hall's wrongful conviction to the authorities says it's unacceptable that no one did anything about it. Mr Hall's murder conviction was quashed by the Supreme Court in June last year. In a heavily redacted report, Nicolette Levy KC has found Crown lawyers didn't consider Mike Wesley Smith's new evidence in detail. Wesley Smith says he gave the same evidence to police and to the Ministry of Justice.
I don't know what it says about those agencies where evidence of innocence is presented in a wrongful murder conviction case and not one of them takes any steps proactively to make sure that it's corrected.
Mike Wesley Smith, a former lawyer himself, says there should be a commission of inquiry into the handling of the case. Young people demanding the government do a better job of addressing the climate crisis have held marches across the country, including in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. 13-year-old Yaya was one of many teens at today's climate strike in Wellington. She says her school supported her skipping class.
A lot of people from our school are really into all this climate action, so we really have support from the school. Like, we do stuff to support our climate and our environment at our school.
This mother in Auckland says it's the first time her young family have joined the cause.
We're here because we're terrified. We're terrified as parents, and we're really scared for the future that our kids are stepping into.
A former top sportsman has been discharged without conviction over a domestic violence charge and allowed to keep his name secret. The one-time New Zealand representative appeared today for sentencing on 4 charges. Our reporter Robin Martin was at New Plymouth District Court.
In the first incident, the man grabbed his former partner from behind in a bear hug and threw away her phone. The following day, he went on to a property he was barred from and wrote derogatory comments over a photo frame of sentimental value to the victim and cut up her bank cards. In sentencing, Judge Hikaka said a conviction would outweigh the gravity of the offending. He ordered the man to pay $1,000 in emotional harm reparations.
There are hopes that parts of the historic Sydney factory gutted in a spectacular blaze yesterday can still be saved. Only 2 walls in the heritage-listed Henderson Hat Factory are still standing. Acting Fire Superintendent Jeremy Futrell told the ABC it's too soon to say what will happen to the site.
It will depend on what the engineering assessment is, and then also how they deal with the issues there. If there's any chance of saving parts of the building, I guess that's an option that will be explored, but it's too early to make any commitments one way or the other.
2 13-year-olds have handed themselves in to police. A woman whose brother died in the Loafers Lodge fire says he'd be grieving for the other victims if he'd survived. Wellington busker Michael Warlick, affectionately known as Mike the Juggler, is one of 5 known deaths. His sister, Margaret Warlick, told the funeral that her brother was a caring person and would be as heartbroken as she is.
Our hearts go out to all the victims of the fire and the condolences to their friends and family. Michael was a cool dude and a cute man with morals and lots of love to share through his juggling and chit-chat.
Margaret Warlick says her brother began juggling as a child using oranges and lemons. In world news, Ukraine's reporting fresh missile attacks in the last 2 hours. Newly released FBI files show Queen Elizabeth faced a plot to kill her during a visit to the US in 1983. The White House and Republicans may be close to a deal over the US national debt ceiling, and Japanese authorities have arrested a 31-year-old man after 4 people were killed in a rare shooting and stabbing incident. To sport now, and Dunedin will farewell Highlanders and All Black halfback Aaron Smith tonight. Smith, who's played 183 Super Rugby games, heads to Japan after the World Cup. The 9th-placed Highlanders host the Reds in a must-win match, with Smith hoping they can claim the 8th and last playoff spot.
I owe this place a lot, and I owe Dunedin a lot. I owe the Highlanders a lot, and I've got a lot of special moments on this field, and I'd just love nothing more than just to win this weekend.
Meanwhile, former All Black and Black Ferns coach Wayne Smith believes the different perspective he offers is the biggest skill he brings to his new role. Smith thought retirement beckoned, so he's chuffed to be the new performance coach to support the respective head coaches of the Black Ferns and All Blacks and to be back doing things in person.
I prefer the face-to-face stuff personally. Zoom's a handy tool, but you can't see body language, and I find it hard sometimes to get the point through. So I think there'll be a few visits. I have been to a couple of camps with Bunts already this year with Black Ferns. I loved that whole adventure last year, so it's been pretty exciting to be back in there and having a look at what's going on.
The Boston Celtics have again staved off elimination with a 110-97 win over the Miami Heat in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference NBA Finals. The Heat lead the best of 7 series 3-2. And Manchester United will return to Champions League football next season after hammering Chelsea 4-1 to secure a top 4 finish. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, are we too economically dependent on China? Is it friend or foe? The remarkable story of the taka hare, believed extinct not once but twice. Tim Finn plays favourite, and we'll talk about the psychology of pain. Cork and Hillaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine today, apart from areas of fog in Waikato. Mostly cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers. From Waitomo to Manawatu, including the Central High Country. Also from Gisborne to Waidadapa, mainly fine. Areas of cloud or fog and isolated showers about Taranaki. From Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. A few showers mainly tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla, cloudy periods. Showers about Bulla and a few elsewhere. Westland, Fiordland and the Canterbury High Country. Rain spreading north today with heavy falls and squally thunderstorms. Severe gale northwesterlies in exposed places. Rain and wind easing tomorrow. For the remainder of Canterbury, high cloud. Otago and Southland, rain this afternoon or evening, then mainly fine. Another period of rain about southern Southland tomorrow. Severe gale northwesterlies in exposed places today. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I will have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. 2 13-year-olds have handed themselves into police after a massive fire destroyed a heritage building in Sydney yesterday. Flames engulfed the multi-storey building in Surrey Hills with huge walls disintegrating under the heat of the flames and crashing down to the street below. Firefighters have described it as a once-in-a-decade blaze. Acting Assistant Police Commissioner Paul Dunstan says the investigation is continuing.
I can further confirm that we're aware of a further 3 or 4 other young people that were present during the fire. We asked them to come forward with their parents and put their side of the story forward. We are aware that people were sleeping rough in the building the night before, up to 15 people. We have spoken to 13 of those people and confirmed that they are safe and well. There are 2 other people that we'd like to just track down and just confirm that they are safe and well, and our detectives are working furiously to try and locate those people.
The fire brought gridlock to the city. The building is right near Central Station in Sydney, meaning there was huge travel disruption. And nearby buildings were also evacuated. The ABC's Rachel Mealy has more.
Fearsome sight. The fire tore through the former hat factory on Randall Street near Central Station in the inner Sydney suburb of Surrey Hills. As the flames engulfed the building, explosions sent bricks and debris flying.
There was the loudest noise. Literally, like, the ground shook.
All you could feel when you were sitting there was just heat on your face from the flames.
Hopefully, I think all the firefighters were standing back, so no big problem. But I think it's an empty building, so that's good.
Overnight, firefighters worked to douse the embers and secure the area. There are now risks the remaining walls of the building could collapse. Built in 1912, the site was heritage listed. In recent years, it's been used for office space, but had since been left empty. A development application has been lodged with the City of Sydney to turn the site into a luxury hotel. The outer shell of the building was made of bricks and the internal structure was timber and masonry. Alex Greenwich is the local member for the seat of Sydney in the New South Wales Parliament, and he's also the former Sydney City Councillor.
The fire incident that happened in this abandoned building in Surrey Hills is obviously not an event that happens commonly in Sydney. This is a fairly isolated event, and fortunately it appears that no one has been seriously injured. Also, having an abandoned or derelict building within Sydney is also quite a rare occurrence.
He says there might need to be a review of fire safety for abandoned buildings.
The 7-storey former hat factory was due to be redeveloped into a luxury hotel. Rachel Mealy also spoke to those working on the project.
Architect Tim Greer has spent 6 years working on plans to restore the Henderson Hat Factory to its former glory. The Sydney City Council had already approved the plans for the site to be redeveloped into a luxury hotel, incorporating the heritage building into the design.
The original building was complete. You know, it had its beautiful brick facade. It had its amazing timber floors with big timber posts and bearers and joists and timber boards. It was a, classic 19th century warehouse. And very much the new design was based around that, sort of expressing and exposing that wonderful history of the site.
Tim Greer says the owner of the property and his fellow architects feel distraught about the fire.
It's a shame to talk on such an occasion, but yes, needless to say, we're all just in an absolute state of shock. When I say we, I'm referring to the client and all the architects involved. I think this is, we had just got to the end of about a 6-year process and we were ready to move on to the next stage, which was the building part of the project. So, yes, we're just a bit overwhelmed at the moment.
The height of the inferno, huge flames were seen streaking into the sky and licking neighbouring buildings. Stephen Kipp is a fire safety engineer. He says the outside structure of the building was brick, but inside was a huge fuel load that erupted as the fire took hold.
But those old buildings have timber floors, timber columns, so the outside brickwork walls are the only thing that's not combustible. So there's, probably 50 or 80 or 100 years of dust and dirt and grime and oil, and depending on what the building was used for, a lot of that residue sits in the timber. So they're highly combustible.
That report from the ABC. Nothing to do with us. That was the conclusion of Crown Law staff after a cursory glance at new evidence strongly suggesting Alan Hall was innocent. Hall had his conviction for the 1985 murder of Arthur Easton quashed by the Supreme Court last year after already spending nearly 2 decades behind bars. Yet an independent report has cleared Crown lawyers of wrongdoing and failing to act 5 years ago. Ruth Hill has more.
In 2018, journalist Mike Wesley-Smith uncovered critical evidence of Alan Hall's innocence, including eyewitness descriptions of a very different suspect. He turned over all his research to the authorities, but nothing happened. Mr. Hall stayed in prison for another 1,200 days.
What people need to understand is that the evidence that I provided to Crown Law in September 2018 was determined by the Supreme Court to be enough on its own to overturn Alan Hall's conviction.
Wesley-Smith, a former lawyer himself, gave the police and the Ministry of Justice the same information, but felt like he was yelling into a deep, dark hole.
All of them brushed me off, which is personally why I believe there should be a Royal Commission of Inquiry into those agencies' handling of Alan's case.
Last year, the Supreme Court found Alan Hall had suffered a grave miscarriage of justice. Evidence was deliberately altered. Interviewing was unfair. The court concluded it was either extreme incompetence or a deliberate wrongful strategy to achieve a conviction. Solicitor General Una Yagos received this report from Nicolette Levy KC in December and subsequently referred some matters to police for investigation. In the heavily redacted version released today, Ms Levy says lawyers at Crown Law in 2018 weren't in a position to see the miscarriage of justice because they didn't look at the evidence in any detail. They were aware Hall was about to file another appeal and believed it would all be dealt with then. The family's investigator, Tim McKinnell, says it was looked at closely enough by Crown Counsel to find the case was untidy.
And they got advice from a senior police officer who'd looked at it, Detective Inspector Dave Lynch, who said it was ugly. When you have somebody sitting in prison for murder decades after an offence, and those are your views, we think that you should be obligated to do something about it.
Law Professor Mark Hanahan says Crown Law can't just secure conviction and then wash their hands of it.
It's a worry. It's almost like we've done this job, it's not our problem anymore. Well, the system should always be open to new evidence and change. When the system's open to try and get new evidence to prosecute someone, the same should actually apply new evidence to show they shouldn't be in jail. The mindset should apply to both.
Professor Hanahan says the justice system is like most bureaucracies. Its highest priority is defending itself rather than the public. Alan Hall's brother Jeff Hall says the family is not happy the Crown had evidence of his innocence for 4 years but didn't take action. He's read the unredacted report and supports keeping it suppressed for now.
Alan was convicted by not having a fair trial, in my view, and it's important that any future trials that come up, they have to be fair. We want that.
Alan Hall and his family are now waiting for the police investigation into those findings not yet made public. The Independent Police Conduct Authority investigation is also on hold until that comes out, and a report on possible compensation for Alan Hall is yet to come.
It's 5:15. Interested in your views on that one? Do get in touch. Homai Ofakaro 2101 on text. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hundreds of people have today marked the death of a man well known for juggling on the streets of Wellington. Michael Warlick, affectionately known as Mike the Juggler, is one of 5 people known to have died in the Loafers Lodge fire. He is the first public funeral for a victim of the blaze. Our reporter Sonia Barmedi-Party and cameraman Angus Drever were there.
Mourners from all walks of life trickle into the Newtown Funeral Home. Buskers, police, social workers, government bureaucrats, gang members and the mayor. All here for Mike the Juggler, well known for tossing tennis balls on the capital's streets for 3 decades. Now, those same balls adorn the top of his casket.
I asked my mother for 50 cents to watch the elephant jump the fence. He jumped so high, he touched the sky. He didn't come down to the 4th of July, walking the dog, yeah.
A fellow busker pays tribute through a song he used to perform with Mike on Manners Street back in the 80s. About 300 people watched the funeral service online, while more than 100 attended in person. Margaret Warlick, one of Mike's 4 siblings, says the 67-year-old began juggling as a child, using oranges and lemons from the kitchen. She says he was a caring person who would be grieving for the other 5 victims if he'd survived.
Our hearts go out to all the victims of the fire and the condolences to their friends and family. Michael was a cool dude and a cute man, with morals and lots of love to share through his juggling and chit-chat.
Others spoke of their worry when the juggler was hospitalised last year after being badly assaulted at Loafers Lodge. Paul worked as a rubbish collector on Lambton Quay and saw Mike every morning at 7 o'clock.
Always smiling. You'd walk past him sometimes, say hello, and all he'd say would be, yep. It's like, that's Mikey. When you got beaten up, that really hit hard, that someone would do that to you. It affected me quite a bit because you were missed on the streets.
Those who survived the blaze have described blocked exits and fire alarms which were constantly going off. Richard London was a 17-year-old student when he met Mike and learnt to juggle from him. Now, more than 30 years later, the building inspector says he'll work hard to make homes safer in memory of the juggler.
Those people in government, maybe those people you don't see,
Well, I'm one of those people. I knew Mike, and I want to make sure that we have a better place for New Zealand and for us and our whānau. And so we'll be thinking about that, and he'll be on top of mind when I start having those discussions with those other officials about what do we do about this? How do we make buildings safer? So to your family, that's my promise to you.
A 48-year-old man is facing 2 charges of arson following the blaze. The police say up to 10 people remain missing.
It is 19 minutes after 5, and if you are listening to that story on radio, do check out the video version. It will be posted on our webpage. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Coming up, we speak to tech expert Paul Spain about the e-commerce site Temu and concern it's targeting children with freebies. Also coming up on the program is a story about potholes. I bet there's some in your district. Do get in touch. The worst ones, please. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz, or the email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I'm interested in who should pay if those potholes damage your car. Brian's got in touch already. Who should pay for potholes? The ones who make them, the trucking companies carting freight that should be on rail, he reckons. Let us know what you think. It is time to go to the headlines now. Evie's standing by. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. Young people have been joined by others of all ages at climate action demonstrations across the country today, asking the government to take urgent action on the crisis. The organisers from School Strike for Climate and Fridays for Future want the government to mandate a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. Protesters spoken to by RNZ reporters say time is running out to do anything, while there was real fear for future generations if nothing's done. Tributes have been paid during the funeral of a prominent Wellington Street entertainer killed in the Loafers Lodge fire last week. Michael Warlick, affectionately known as Mike the Juggler, was the first public funeral for one of the 5 people known to have died in the fire. Mourners described him as always smiling and eager to chat, no matter what time of day they saw him at his juggling spot on Lambton Quay. Wellington Mayor Tory Whanau says the whole city is hurting. A journalist is calling for a commission of inquiry into the handling of the Alan Hall murder case. Mike Wesley Smith, who is a former lawyer, passed on critical evidence pointing to Alan Hall's wrongful conviction, but Crown lawyers didn't consider it. And there are indications that the White House and Republicans are moving closer towards an agreement on raising the US government's debt limit so federal bills can continue to be paid. Sources close to the negotiations say differences between the two sides on how to adjust discretionary spending are narrowing. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, in Auckland, a crash by the Vic Park flyover is blocking the left southbound lane on State Highway 1 after the Harbour Bridge, just after entering those connections to head south or west by the waterfront. In Wellington, the strong wind warning over Rimutaka Hill has been lifted. That's State Highway 2. Meanwhile, there is now a strong wind warning in place from Arthur's Pass to Otsira, State Highway 73. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Former Black Ferns and All Blacks coach Wayne Smith has been lured back to the New Zealand rugby in a new role. As a performance coach, he'll mentor and support the incoming All Blacks coach, Scott Robertson, and his successor as Black Ferns coach, Alan Bunting. He officially takes on the job in November and wants to challenge the coaches to think differently.
Having diversity of people and different perspectives is really important when you're decision making. Sometimes you choose old decisions that you've made before, whereas a new solution might be a better option. So those are the sorts of discussions that I'm sure we'll have.
Well, we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, so why have they created this role for Wayne Smith as a coach for the coaches?
Well, it was very clear that New Zealand Rugby didn't want to lose a talent like Wayne Smith after he'd led the Black Ferns to that Rugby World Cup victory last year. He thought he was on his way to retirement, in all honesty. He'd been involved with New Zealand Rugby since 1979 in various roles as a player, a coach, a mentor. He'd even been the CEO of Hawke's Bay. But it's that type of experience that New Zealand Rugby really wants to draw on. So he's been lured back again. It's the black jersey. He was saying whether it's the men, whether it's the women, whether it's the Māori All Blacks, that still has a pull for him and he wants to still be involved. It's a bit of a unique role, though, because it crosses both the men's and women's spaces, which not a lot of roles at New Zealand Rugby actually do. So he's also going to be working with 2 coaches that he's worked with before. So he coached Scott Robertson as a player, and he was obviously working with Alan Bunting in the Black Ferns last year when Alan Bunting was the cultural advisor. So these are 2 people and taking 2 teams into a new era. And basically this is maybe seen as a way to keep them with Wayne Smith offering some of maybe the advice from the past, and what he's saying there as well, he wants to offer some fresh perspective as well for these people as sort of new eras and new teams, new ways as the New Zealand rugby moves forward, I guess, into the next couple of years, because as it's saying, it's not really going to be a role that comes into play until next year. Before then, Wayne Smith says he's off to Europe doing a bit of travelling, so he's getting a bit of time away from rugby. He won't be going to the World Cup and the Men's World Cup in France. He's not taking the time out to do that. Instead, he says he's too busy. So he's going to do a little bit of travelling and then get back into this role, which he sort of joked today. He said he doesn't really know how long this role will be, whether it's going to take him a couple of days to get involved, which it obviously won't. But it's also like he doesn't know how much of a direct involvement he's going to have. I guess he's there as a bit of a sounding board. And as you may have heard a little bit earlier in the news, he's not really a fan of Zoom. So it'll be a lot of face-to-face interactions with Scott Robertson and Alan Bunting.
Oh, he won't be alone in that sentiment, I'm sure. OK, so tonight's Super Rugby Pacific game in Dunedin will be extra special for All Black and Highlanders halfback Aaron Smith.
Yes, last home game for Aaron Smith for the Highlanders. It's a franchise that he's played over 180 games across 13 years for. I mean, this isn't his hometown club. He's from the Manawatu, so he moved south and sort of has that different loyalty to this side, which maybe it's been a little bit hard over his time to have a little bit of loyalty. I mean, this season isn't the type of season that he would want to sign off with. They're really struggling to get into the playoffs. He doesn't really know how much more of a season he's got because this is his last Super Rugby season. He'll, I guess, hopefully be playing for the All Blacks at the World Cup, and after that will be going to Japan to play for Toyota Vibits. So it's a bit of a sign-off, a beginning of a farewell tour, as we say in this for this. But he's been a big part of that region, a star out of there. And I think over the last couple of years, he's really wanted to take on that leadership role around making sure that he leads the current side, but also leaves the Highlanders kind of in a good place when he leaves after like that decade there. I've heard stories of him, you know, being quite accessible to the high school and club halfbacks as he wants to build that next generation. And even Falau Fakatava, who is at the Highlanders now, a guy who would have really been pressing for Aaron's place, even though Aaron is a very highly regarded halfback, he was wanting to help that guy out as well. So it's that kind of thing that he wants to leave the Highlanders with. He said that he was mentored in that way when he joined the club. So it's part of that. And I guess the crowd, Forsyth Bar as well, probably want to send off a champion with a win against the Reds tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Felicity. Felicity Reid, sports reporter there. Concern tonight, an online megastore is targeting children with freebies like Crocs and electronics. But is the real price valuable personal data? The e-commerce site Temu launched last year with super cut price goods, including everything from clothing to cosmetics, homeware and electronics. It offers freebies to subscribers and credits for those who recruit friends and family onto the platform too. Kids as young as 12 are signing up to the site, lured in by zero-cost goodies, including toys and footwear. But they have to provide their personal details, including their birth date and phone number, and get their friends on board too. There's no credit or debit card details required, and so there's no need to get a parent's permission. So should you be worried if your child is signed up? Well, joining us now is Gorilla Technology CEO Paul Spain. Hi, Paul.
Hey, this is an interesting one.
Isn't it just free stuff? The kids will be going yippee, so what's the issue?
Well, usually if something's too good to be true, then it usually is. And we shouldn't be trusting these things. We see a lot of scammers online, and to me, Temu looks like exactly that. It looks to be a scam of sorts. Yes, you can order products and get them back, but their app asks for, I saw a reference to 24 permissions on your device accessing your list of Wi-Fi networks, Bluetooth access, photos, videos, contact info, and so on. So this is not normal for a trusted application. In fact, the previous application from their parent company, PDD Holdings of China, had actually got banned from the Google Play Store. So, they're a company that's known not to be trustworthy, put it that way.
So it is a legitimate site, right, though? It's an actual legitimate site. People can purchase products, and I know there's been questions about whether they arrive in a timely fashion and the quality, but there is actually goods that you can order and buy. Is your issue with the information that they are asking from these younger people?
Look, I think that is one of the big concerns here, is that they're asking for a lot of information, but also when you're giving away things that are so much cheaper than other sites, or as you said, using it for free without actually any usage at all, then you have to wonder what the motivations are, behind the scenes here, and how they're going to use that data that they're actually harvesting, and whether your phone could in some way be infected with malware, if that is a part of their app, as was suggested with their previous app.
So date of birth and your full name and phone number is what they're asking of, some of the details. How valuable is that information, and how can it be monetised?
Well, if they're taking advantage of all the rights, which potentially gives them access to other content on your phone as well, I guess the questions are, and knowing the way that China has a range of legislation, but in particular one piece that means that the state can demand any company hand over any data they've got. You have to worry about how these dots could be joined up. But also what malicious ways could a private company use that data, or are they selling that data onto others? It just doesn't stack up to be giving away, free goods to a whole lot of people. In general, I mean, you could argue, I suppose, that they're just trying to compete with the big players like Amazon, who are worth, Amazon worth over $1 trillion, and the way. One of the reasons why these big players are worth so much is they have a big base of people that buy from them. So this could be a bit of a land grab, but I would be very concerned around the data that they're actually asking for.
In short, would you be happy to have a 12, 13, 14-year-old signed up to this platform?
Not at all. I wouldn't install it on my own phone, and certainly wouldn't be encouraging youngsters to be using it at all, or anyone for that matter.
Really appreciate your time. That is Paul Spain from Gorilla Technology there, talking to us about Temu, that app, e-commerce app. It's huge, lots of cut price goods. Let us know your thoughts on that, and if you've got a young person in your house, if they signed up to it too, because they get incentives and credits for signing their friends on. Text us on 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 29 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa NINA, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us in the studio live.
Let's talk business.
Okay, let's get down to business. Fisher & Paykel, they've reported a drop in the full-year profit and a revenue drop. What are their numbers?
Yeah, they weren't very good, let's say. So Fisher & Paykel, that's one of the darlings of the market we've seen over the years. The company delivers not just growth in share price, for example, but also dividends and what have you. They did deliver on the dividends. This time around, their full-year dividend was up 3% on the year earlier. But net profit was down 34%. Revenue down 6%. Hospital revenue was what really led that down 15%. And home care revenue, that's where people have respiratory devices in the home for sleep apnea, that sort of thing. That was up 18%. But that wasn't enough to make up the difference. And the reason why the hospital numbers were down was because COVID caused an enormous surge in demand for their products. And during that time, they were more concerned with churning out the products they needed to get to the hospitals and less concerned about costs and all the other things that go with that. They said now they're back on track. They're going to become more prudent in terms of how they manage their costs because there's not an emergency happening. They're very positive about the future, but the market wasn't convinced. And in this case, their share price dropped today 6.5%. That's huge because it's a very big company in the New Zealand scheme of things. So, it wasn't a great result for Fisher & Paykel.
Profits.
Yeah, they made a lot. Well, and of course, you're comparing, what was basically last year, this time it was Omicron. And then, of course, before. So 2019, they're saying, look, we're doing pretty good based on what we did in 2019. But they need to get back to where they were. One of the things that was hit which is something that the market does focus on, is their gross margin. So that's what things actually cost, how much they're making from their revenue. 59.4% was their gross margin, but the year before was 65.6. And what they want to see is something around that 60 mark, 65. That's the sweet spot for Fisher & Paykel. That's where they want to be, so they're going to be working towards that. But I guess the market wants to see the results before they reward them. There you go.
Now, the Shareholders Association says average attendance at annual shareholding meetings has dropped by a quarter from pre-pandemic levels. What is the reason? Are they boring them to death?
Well, I would have thought the sausage rolls would be enough to make you want to go.
Snacks.
Yeah, I mean, well, who doesn't like the good sausage roll, right? But no, apparently people have kind of turned away from the shareholders meetings, and we have a lot of them. You know, that's a mandatory thing. You have to have a shareholders meeting once you file your report. So, of course, you know, there's going to be a few coming up. What the Shareholders Association is saying, though, is part of the reason why there's a drop in the number of people attending is because the disclosure requirements and corporate reporting is at a much higher standard than it used to be. So there's not as much need to go and grill the company about numbers that aren't there because they are there. So you can look at them online. But what the market, the shareholders are saying is that about 75% of people want hybrid meetings. That's where you can watch online or turn up.
Can you? Can you right now? Can you zoom into these meetings?
Well, not always. Some of them are not online.
And do they count that as attendance because you're watching?
Well, yeah, of course, because you register and you can vote. Like some of them are very sophisticated. You can push the button B and right away, button B. No one remembers that, right? You even looking at me.
Anyway.
Never mind.
All right. So markets overall. What do you have for us?
Fisher & Paykel, like I say, 6.5% down. That dragged the market down 1.1%. Or rather, to 11,830. Kiwi under pressure still, and probably continuing. 60.7 US cents, 93.1 Australian, and 49.2 pence. That's because of what happened with the OCR and this thing that's hanging around called the debt ceiling. That's the debt that the U.S. needs to kind of, some $30 trillion that they need to kind of come up with for their budget. And they've got a ceiling that's preventing that from passing. They're still negotiating. Hopefully they have till the end of the week to sort it out. So let's hope they get onto that. Meanwhile, we'll watch and worry.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Young people demanding immediate action on climate change from the government have held marches across the country. School Strike for Climate and Fridays for Future want to see New Zealand reduce emissions and lower the voting age to 16. Reporter Anna Sargent and video journalist Samuel Rillstone were among the crowds.
Chanting and cheers rang out in central Christchurch this afternoon. Hundreds of people with signs and banners calling for urgent climate action gathered at Cathedral Square and marched through the streets. High school students led the charge. 17-year-old Aurora Garner Randolph is one of the organisers of School Strike for Climate or Tautahi.
The adults that we trust to take care of us, to protect our planet, are not doing their job at all. And so we feel that we need to do anything that we can to hold them to account.
Katya Delu says she's at the march as a parent standing up for her child's future.
I want my child and all children to have a sustainable, safe, healthy future. The government really has been dragging its feet on doing anything to reduce agricultural emissions, which is really disappointing.
In Auckland, hundreds of people, including Minister Marama Davidson and City MP Chloe Swarbrick, gathered at Victoria Park following the protest to Auckland Council. The crowd was full of families, kids young and old, all saying more needs to be done.
V-O-T-E, climate justice sets us free. V-O-T-E.
We're here because we're terrified. We're terrified as parents, and we're really scared for the future that our kids are stepping into.
We're striking because we just really want to make a difference and save the planet.
We really have to do something else. We're really going to be in big trouble.
I think that when people see how passionate the young people are and us oldies, they will think, oh, maybe there's something to this.
We're very much hoping that politicians and the leaders and they're all paying attention to what we've got to say.
When our future is under attack,
In Wellington, around 1,000 people marched from Civic Square to Parliament. 13-year-old Yaya was one of the many skipping school.
A lot of people from our school are really into all this climate action, so we really have support from the school. Like, we do stuff to support our climate and our environment at our school.
Meanwhile, Bede and his friends were concerned about the survival of polar bears and turtles.
I don't want to die. Water levels rising, I want polar bears too. Polar bears are cool. I don't think littering is okay, and a lot of turtles die, and I like polar bears.
This teen at Wellington's protest says she doesn't want to see native animals, such as the kiwi, being put at risk.
The climate change and like sea levels rising and deforestation due to the change in climate will cause our animals to unfortunately become homeless.
Organisers of the countrywide protests, the Aotearoa Climate Strikes Coalition, have 5 demands they want met. These include a 50% reduction in emissions and a complete transition to regenerative agriculture by 2030.
And again, if you were listening to that story on radio, do check out the video which was filmed by Samuel Rillstone. It'll be on our webpage. One of New Zealand's dwindling number of World War II veterans is turning 100 today. Oliver Candy will celebrate the milestone with family in Levin. Ahead of the big day, he spoke with our reporter Jimmy Allingham.
Oliver Candy, known as Ollie, remembers his early life as one of 6 boys on a northern Hawke's Bay farm. It was another world.
No car, we had horses and gigs and wagons, and we used to go 15 miles by horse and gig and one buggy, and catch a service car at Tutera to go to Napier.
Then one day in early 1931, that world shook.
The district was shaken by an earthquake of the magnitude of 7 3/4 on the Richter scale. The epicentre being 20 kilometres northwest of Napier.
It was terrifying. The ground was opening and shutting. The whole ground was waving like a sea. I could see my neighbour coming down the track with his horse and dogs. Then as the wave of the earth was shaking, all you see was his hat. And when it went down, we could see the horse and dogs. That's how much the ground was moving, and the whole hillsides collapsed.
Shortly after, Mr. Candy saw an aeroplane for the first time flying in supplies. But times were tough, and the family soon moved to Masterton.
Dad walked off the farm and it was a slump, couldn't sell your wool, or wild pigs ate most of his lambs. And
By World War II, the family had shifted to Horowhenua. 4 of the 6 Candy boys signed up to serve, including Oliver and his twin brother Bill, who died in 2020. Oliver Candy was injured shortly after joining the drive to clear the Germans out of Italy.
We got a couple of bazookas into our tank, and it was the end of our war. Yeah. The tank caught fire, and we were singed, and we had to jump out, and I landed on uneven ground or something and broke my leg and ankle. I was 3 months in hospital, yeah.
Mr. Candy also had splinters in his eyes. That wasn't the end of his wartime troubles. At one stage he drank poisoned wine. When he heard over the radio that the war was over, he was on guard duty.
Good morning. This is the first day of the world at peace. The war is over. And I was on my own, yeah. But there was other people there, and somebody started throwing grenades around and exploding. I don't know if they were AT-36s or practice bombs, so they were going off anyway. So I got down under the sandbags and kept out of that. I didn't want to get wounded when that was all over.
Take a look at these men. One of these days they'll come back home, and thousands of others like them. Take a look at their faces. Let us be sure that we remember them.
He then had some time with occupation forces in Japan before heading home for civilian life.
As the Prime Minister said, nothing's too good for the boys, and I reckon that's what we got, nothing. We had a trip from Bari right up to Naples, and you could see that where all different battles were. As far as you could see is white crosses. Thousands and thousands of people got killed, What for? Now the Germans and the Japs were our friends. We trade with them.
Mr. Candy married the late Jenny in 1948. The pair split up for a while before remarrying in 1984, the year they moved into their Levin family home. 4 years later, Mr. Candy had to retire at 65 from his job running the boiler system at Levin Hospital. Decades later, apart from eyesight problems, he remains fit and alert.
All my working life, I never had a day off work with sickness. Amazing, eh? No, I never ever drew sick pay at all. I don't smoke and I don't booze. I have a little bit of wine every night, but I don't booze, you know. I'm just lucky to have good health.
There's one thing Mr. Candy is adamant about for his birthday celebration: no presents. He says as he approaches 100, he's got everything he needs.
And that was Oliver Candy speaking with our reporter Jimmy Allingham. It is almost a quarter to 6 rather. You with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program this evening. We would love to hear from you. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anea Iwi mena pita kōrero.
A technology expert says an e-commerce site that's targeting children with free goods to sign up and attract their friends is concerning. The e-commerce site Temu is targeting children as young as 12 with freebies, but in turn they need to provide valuable personal data without parental consent. Gorilla Technologies' Paul Spain told Checkpoint if people see things online that are too good to be true, it often is. He says parents need to be concerned at the data that is being provided, and he wouldn't use the site. Nurses are stopping work to review the latest pay offer from Te Whatu Ora. Members of the nurses' organisation who work for Health New Zealand will go to one of 57 two-hour meetings next week. The union says Te Whatu Ora hasn't addressed members' claims around safe staffing and their well-being at work. Parents and grandparents have expressed their fears for the future if the government does nothing to address the climate crisis. A series of climate change protests organised by youth activists occurred across the country today. Adults were also well represented at the protests, with one Auckland mother saying she was terrified if nothing's done. And the sister of one of the victims of the Loafers Lodge blaze last week has told people at his funeral that he would have been grieving for the others killed if he had survived. The funeral for Michael Warlick, affectionately known as Mike the Juggler, was the first funeral for any of the 5 victims known to have died in the fire. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic at the top of the South Island, State Highway 6, Belgrove to Kohatu will reopen at 7 o'clock tonight in about an hour and a quarter, and under a temporary speed limit over the weekend after having to close because of a slip earlier in the week. Our next news and weather are at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. A cluster of potholes has left a whangarei mum with an unusable car and a chunky repair bill after the thud of hitting them set an airbag off, and she'd like the road maintenance contractors to cough up. Earlier this month, Danielle Gordon was driving north on State Highway 10 with her 4-month-old son, Alfie. She was about 10 minutes out of Kerikeri when she says she had to swerve to miss a mini crater in the road, only to run straight into another cluster of potholes. Danielle Gordon takes up the story.
My airbag had gone off and I thought maybe something had hit into me or I'd hit something, or I really didn't know what had happened. I was in shock. Baby woke up instantly with the crying and from the loud bang and that, and I unfortunately didn't know what damage had happened to the vehicle once I'd known that the airbag had deployed. So I climbed out of the passenger seat and tended to baby, and then proceeded to look around my vehicle to see that there was no initial visual damage. And I ended up ringing a friend for some advice on what to do. And he asked if the vehicle was drivable. So I checked that and continued to Kerikeri, where I then parked the vehicle.
So was it just one airbag that went off, Danielle?
Yeah, so it was the driver's door airbag and the pillar.
Okay. So this pothole, I mean, was it a cluster of potholes? Were they big? What can you tell us?
So it was kind of, well, when you think of a cluster, you think of like a group of potholes, don't you? You think of a group, a cluster as a group kind of thing. And it was kind of spaced out across my lane. There was one initial one that looked really deep, which was the one that I was trying to miss, thinking the other ones didn't look too bad. But when I hit those other ones is what caused the airbag to go off.
So basically, boom, and this airbag comes flying out.
Yeah.
You must have got a hell of a fright.
Oh, I did. Like I said, I was in shock, and I didn't come out of that shock properly till the next day or so.
Was there any
even
warning
now.
signs? Any sort of road signs?
No, there was no road signs. There was traffic before me. There was no traffic directly before me, but further before me there's traffic coming both ways. If I'd swerved any more to miss the potholes that I hit, I would have been in oncoming traffic.
Okay, so you came out of it okay, and baby Alfie's okay?
Yep, baby Alfred's good. I'm good. I had a bit of a bruise on my hip where the airbag hit me.
But the car, not so much, Danielle?
But yeah, no, the car's not the greatest. We had just got our vehicle warranted and registered and safe for the road, but unfortunately the road's not safe for us, so it's a real shame because we're out of pocket big time now.
What's it going to cost to get the repairs done?
We've only managed to get one quote, which is for the undercarriage damages, which is $2,200. And then the interior, we need to get a quote done, but that's going to cost $200 to $400 to get that quote done.
That's a hell of an expensive pothole.
Yeah, very.
So, I understand you've been in contact with the roading contractor who is responsible for that section of the road, right? This is Fulton Hogan?
Yes, so we've been in contact with them and we sadly have not had a reply after submitting our claim report.
So you want them to pay?
We would like somebody to pay. Somebody needs to be responsible for the damages done to our car and other people's cars that has had damages done via the potholes.
So they haven't agreed to pick up the bill yet?
They haven't contacted us at all. So, yeah.
Do you think, you mentioned other people, do you think others have, fallen into the same problem, literally?
Definitely, yeah. Without a doubt, definitely.
What are you hearing
maybe
about
that? Well, there's a lot of talk on Facebook on the Northland potholes page about the different potholes around not just Northland but New Zealand. And a lot of them, they're saying good luck, but, we didn't have any luck. I know those potholes, we hit them and it done this damage to our vehicle. So, yeah, I mean, it's really a shame that the work just isn't getting done on our roads that needs to be done.
Well, sure enough, Danielle is not alone. A quick call to a Kirikiri tyre shop revealed dozens of motorists have fallen foul of those potholes and others in the area, and it's keeping Robbie Edge pretty busy.
There's a fair few on State Highway 10. It's sort of south of Kirikiri a little bit, and then there's up towards Waipapa, which is north of Kirikiri, but they've been a constant issue. They're sort of patching them, but whenever it rains, they just open up again, and I've probably, they smash a lot of rims and tyres on cars. There's probably about 40 vehicles I've dealt with in the last, month, 6 weeks, and probably half of those weren't repairable, so it's a bit of an issue, yeah, for sure.
Wow, so what does some new rims cost you?
Some of them customers anywhere between $200 and $400 a rim, depending on what they are, I guess, so. But some of the customers had to replace a full set because they couldn't match them up with the ones they had on there. So, yeah. And there was one woman that had her airbag go off. She hit it that hard. So, yeah.
So what are these potholes like, Robbie? They sound like flipping craters in the road, the amount of damage they're doing.
They are pretty sizable, but the roading guys, they put signs up, but when it initially happens, you can't see them. And if you're darker there, and you hit them, they can do a bit of damage to the vehicle, so yeah. Yeah.
So in the last month or so, you reckon you've probably had 40 kind of pothole-related repairs?
Oh, yeah, at least, yeah. I'm still doing them. I've got other stuff booked in next week from the same thing, so it's, I'm doing at least between 6 to 10 a week at the moment, so yeah, it's an ongoing issue, so yeah.
How dangerous is it, potentially?
I don't know, if you hit them hard enough, I suppose. Yeah. There was one car that went off the road just south of where I am, so yeah, if you're not aware of it, it can damage the whole vehicle, I guess, so yeah.
Yeah, and that's tyre guy Robbie Edge in Kerikeri there. Checkpoint contacted Fulton Hogan, but it declined to comment. I'm sure you've got lots to say on this one, so text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 6 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai, do stay with us. It took me a long time to be proud of myself. Ian Tongi has become the first Pacific person to win American Idol and says there's no reason why others can't follow in his footsteps. The 18-year-old, who is of Tongan and Samoan descent, wowed the judges and the world with his performances, which he says were inspired by his late father. Ian Tongi told RNZ Pacific's Fino Funua about the moment he won.
It was crazy, man. So when I was there, I was just, I say it all the time, and I say that all the time. But I was just preparing myself, right? I was just getting ready for whatever happened.
The winner of American Idol 2023 is Ian Tongi.
When they said my name, I was just super excited, and I couldn't really show it because right when they said my name, I was excited. Then I grabbed the mic and I had to sing a song, and it was really cool.
You're 18. It must be kind of strange just going from being an everyday normal person at high school, just like every one of us, and then all of a sudden now everybody knows your face, everybody knows who you are. Could you describe that shock? I feel exactly the same, to be honest. It was hard for me to believe, that all these celebrities, they're just people, right? It's cool to see, that people always recognize you, and it's you see the support of everyone and see all the love that I've been getting from all the people that recognize me. It's just, I really love all the people that show their love and come and say, "Oh, I know you're the guy," or "Oh, can I take a picture?" I really love that, and yeah.
Save your tears for another day. Yeah.
You mentioned about being shy and being too proud to embarrass yourself. That's actually something that I've heard from other people, talking about one of the weaknesses, one of the reasons why a lot of Polynesian kids kind of hold back on achieving things.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I talk about it all the time. I want them to get out of that, because I was exactly like that, right? And I want them to get out of that mindset, because if you stay in that mindset, you're just not gonna achieve anything, because you're gonna be too afraid. You're gonna be too prideful. You're gonna be too have too much pride in yourself to go and do something that you love, right? And that you think you can achieve, but you're just too scared. Because me and right? Yeah, us Polynesian people, we have so much talent. We have a lot of talent, and there's people out there, that I know for a fact they could be actors because they're so dramatic, right? And I know people out there that are better singers than me, but they're too afraid, right? And almost like outdated mindset, right? We need to be proud of what we do and be proud of ourselves. And it took me a long time to be proud of myself.
I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye.
We could see the love you had for your father. Could you describe how much your father inspired you?
Honestly, my dad, he's the only reason why I do music, right? And because when I first started playing, I didn't really like it, right? And I only did it because it made my dad happy. And every single time I play, I see my dad. He'd be laughing, he'd be smiling, and we'd just be jamming out. And he really loved music, and he wanted to do it, but he didn't have the patience for learning guitar. Yeah, he'd just be get frustrated when he tried to learn guitar. But when I started learning, he pushed me. He kept pushing me. And honestly, I'm as good as I am today because of my dad.
Saying goodbye. No need to forget, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine.
And that was Ian Tongi, the American Idol winner there. Hey, a lot of you getting in touch about our story about potholes, the interview about potholes and who should pay. This person says potholes on State Highway 1 near Waikouaiti, bent rim, tyre rim and destroyed wheel cover. It is a fact that trucks are destroying the road, that there is a perfectly adequate railway to carry freight the length of the South Island. Alan's got in touch to say we're currently in Fiji and the roads, Alan says, are much better than State Highway 1 in Northland. Gary reckons the state highways need to be resealed as there was way too many patches from roadworks. Some of you getting in touch about Temu as well, concerned that it is holding you, this is the e-commerce site, holding all your personal data and bombarding you with sales ads. Someone says it autofills their credit card and their CVC number.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. A law professor says Crown Law being cleared of any wrongdoing in the case of Alan Hall is a worry. Mr Hall's murder conviction was quashed by the Supreme Court in June last year, but an independent report has cleared Crown Law of any wrongdoing despite it failing to act on evidence of Mr Hall's innocence 4 years ago. Professor Mark Henehan says Crown Law can't just secure a conviction, then wash its hands of it.
It's a worry. It's almost like we've done this job, it's not our problem anymore. Well, the system should always be open to new evidence and change. When the system's open to try and get new evidence to prosecute someone, the same should actually apply to new evidence to show they shouldn't be in jail. The mindset should apply to both.
Professor Henehan says the justice system is like most bureaucracies. Its highest priority is defending itself rather than the public. The government says the groups designing and advising on the redress system for survivors of abuse and care will ensure the system provides genuine healing. A 10-member design group will develop proposals for the redress system and then test these with a 16-member advisory group. Public Service Minister Andrew Little says the work is complicated.
It's not just the financial compensation, it's the ongoing support. And that will be different for different people. So a complex piece of work to do, and it needs a good broad range of voices to make sure it's done properly.
Both groups include survivors of abuse and representatives from Māori, Pasifika, deaf and disabled, rangatahi and LGBTQI+ communities. A coroner has called for a code of practice for snorkelling following the death of a boy on a school trip. 16-year-old Ethan Fitzpatrick drowned after getting into difficulty at an outdoor education session at Lake Rotoma near Rotorua in March 2020. Andrew McRae reports.
The boy was unobserved for approximately 15 to 25 seconds and somehow got into difficulty, inhaled water and became unresponsive. The inquest heard that New Zealand doesn't have any specific guidance for open water snorkelling. Coroner Matthew Bates says until a code's developed in this country, anyone responsible for snorkelling activities should consider using the Queensland Code of Practice. He's also called for easy access to a defibrillator on education outside of the classroom activities.
5 people with gang associations have been charged in West Auckland. Officers searched a West Harbour address yesterday and uncovered a prohibited firearm, ammunition, a restricted weapon and Class A and B drugs. A 44-year-old woman and a 20-year-old man have been arrested. Then today, police searched 3 houses in Ranui, Massey and Te Apatu and found loaded firearms, ammunition, methamphetamine, cash and stolen property. 3 people aged 27, 33 and 50 will appear in court tomorrow on related charges. Gore District Council's belated annual plan is likely to include a double-digit rates hike. The controversy-riven council is well behind in its work to approve the forthcoming financial year's plan. Timothy Brown reports.
While the frosty relationship between Chief Executive Stephen Parry and Mayor Ben Bell has caused ructions around the council table, it's mostly been business as usual for council work. However, the annual plan is well overdue, and councillors will discuss a draft at next Tuesday's extraordinary meeting. Recommended is an 11.5% rates rise, a plan to kick curbside recycling further down the road and not to formally consult the public. It's unlikely to quell the frustration from residents who last week called for Mr Perry to resign at a protest outside the council's office.
An immunisation and screening drive at Kirikiriroa Marae in Hamilton has proved to be a success. It's being done in a bid to raise rates for Māori who are falling behind when compared with Pākehā. Lung cancer screening and cervical cancer checks, along with COVID-19, MMR and tamariki immunisations, were all available today. Hinemua Kingi was one of those who came along and says she'd not have been checked without it.
If it hasn't been for them today, I'm so grateful. We'll never get this kind of thing because most other countries all over the world, they don't get it.
Just over a third of eligible pepe aged 6 months in Waikato have been fully immunised. Prosecutors in France have charged 5 military personnel over the deaths of 27 migrants whose boat sank as they tried to reach Britain. They're accused of failing to help people in danger. The suspects are thought to have been on duty at a Coast Guard rescue centre when the disaster happened in 2021. Newly released FBI files show that the late Queen Elizabeth faced a plot to kill her during a visit to the US in 1983. One file said the threat was made to a police officer by another man who frequented an Irish pub in San Francisco. The BBC's David Willis has more.
And the man apparently said that he was seeking revenge for his daughter who'd been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. And the threat allegedly involved either dropping an object off San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge onto the royal yacht Britannia as it passed underneath, or mounting some sort of unspecified form of attack on the late Queen when she went on to visit Yosemite National Park in Central California.
And a top ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the Ukraine war could last for decades, with long periods of fighting interspersed by truces. Former President Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Mr. Putin's powerful Security Council, was making the comments during a visit to Vietnam. Mr. Medvedev is known for making hardline comments and last month described Ukrainian authorities as an infection. He's earlier threatened nuclear war. That's the news.
This week on Music 101, the godfather of New Zealand hip-hop, DLT, talks to me about Shea Fu and their iconic song Chains.
Is she really going out with him?
Captain Sensible from The Damned talks art, music and kayaking ahead of their New Zealand shows. And on the mixtape, Dujon Carlingford picks his favourite New Zealand funk, soul and disco from the 60s, 70s and 80s. Music 101 with me, Charlotte Ryan, this Saturday from 1 p.m. here on RNZ National.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine today. Tomorrow, areas of morning fog, then cloud increasing and isolated showers developing. From Waitomo to Manawatu, including the Central High Country. Also from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Mainly fine. Isolated showers about Taranaki and areas of morning cloud or fog tomorrow. From Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. A few showers, mainly tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla, cloudy periods. Showers about Bulla and a few elsewhere. Westland, Fiordland and the Canterbury High Country, rain with heavy falls and squally thunderstorms. Severe gale northwesterlies in exposed places. Rain and wind easing tomorrow. For the remainder of Canterbury, high cloud. For Otago and Southland, rain clearing tonight, then mainly fine. Another period of rain about southern Southland tomorrow. Severe gale northwesterlies in exposed places today. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 8 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Community health clinics are again offering incentives in a bid to get people immunised before winter. It's a formula that's worked in the past with COVID vaxathons drawing people in their hundreds with the promise of freebies for those getting a jab. COVID's now just one of the priorities, with measles, mumps, rubella and the flu all being covered off at the same time. Tom Taylor reports.
It's called a multi-vax event, and this weekend, people will be able to roll up their sleeves to get immunised. It's happening at the Whono Health and Social Services Centre in Henderson. Last weekend, about 500 people turned up for an event in Manarewa, and they're expecting about the same this weekend. Tavita Funaki is chief executive of the Whono and says even he was surprised by the turnout.
We were expecting to get around about 300 to 350. We actually had to stop. There was a massive queue. And at that time, there was about 100 cars. We had to stop around about 12:30, knowing that by 2 o'clock when we were finishing, that we'll cover those cars that were coming through.
He says while they don't want to be turning anyone away, the queues were a positive sign, indicating that people don't have as much vaccine fatigue as he feared they might. It doesn't hurt that there's a free sausage sizzle on site, and anyone rolling up to the event gets a $50 Pack and Save voucher. Mr. Funaki says it's a small price to pay for a long-term benefit.
Just talking to families, and obviously they're hurting at the moment. I think cost of living, inflations and things that have an impact in there. So, coming in, they get a double whammy. They'll get a $50 voucher at the same time, get the immunisations done in there. In my view, is a fraction of the cost. So we actually have to look after them later.
But he says while it was the incentives that brought some people along, just having a weekend event meant many more people could make it than a clinic during work hours.
I think the main reasons is that people can actually come together as a group, as a family, coming in, and it's actually outside their working hours and school hours, so they could actually come. Some of them actually come straight after their sports events, kids' sports in the morning. They're there together and they can come through together. So I think the timing was actually quite helpful.
Albany High School was quick to close its doors when 2 cases of measles connected to the school were detected earlier this month. While the swift public health response may have prevented a larger outbreak, Chair of Child Health Research at the University of Auckland, Professor Stuart Dalziel, says New Zealand's low rates of immunisation against the highly contagious disease mean we're still on a knife edge.
The problem with measles is that it is so infectious that we can very quickly, over a couple of months, go from just having a few cases in the community to actually reaching the criteria for an epidemic.
Professor Dalziel says measles can be eradicated completely from New Zealand, but low childhood immunisation rates are preventing this and putting vulnerable people in danger. He says figures show just 2/3 of Kiwi kids have fully completed their immunisation schedules on time.
Quite frankly, those are atrocious.
And the figures get worse. Those living in the most deprived parts of society are sitting at just above 50% completion. And for tamariki Māori, the figure's below 50%. Professor Dalziel says immunisation rates need to be bumped up to 95% if New Zealand wants to block future outbreaks. It may seem a long way to go, but he says the only thing holding us back is a lack of urgency.
Just making the vaccine available, it's just simply not enough. That just puts it on the shelves of the warehouses and in the shelves of the pharmacies. What we need to do, and what is lacking, is a large commitment and prioritisation to an immunisation campaign about getting that vaccine from the shelves into the arms of the people that it needs to be.
Professor Dalziel says if the government decides it wants to prioritise childhood immunisations, it only needs to take a leaf out of its own COVID response manual.
And that report was from Tom Taylor. The huge demand for youth mental health services is causing long waits for patients, with some practices even being forced to turn new clients away. The New Zealand College of Clinical Psychologists says there's not enough new psychologists to meet the growing need, meaning things could get worse before they get better. Luca Foreman reports.
Lena Watt was 16 when her mum took her to a GP because she was worried about her mental health.
By the time I reached the GP, it was really a crisis point. I was already self-harming, and really I just needed help yesterday.
She says she was struggling with depression and needed professional help as soon as possible. Lena says the month and a half she spent waiting to see a specialist was a very difficult time.
It was terrible. I felt like I had no one to reach out to. My mum obviously had no experience or training with this kind of thing.
Lena's mum eventually set her up with a private psychologist, which, while helpful, was expensive. Concerned for those unable to pay to get the help they need, Lena and her mum decided to walk the length of New Zealand to raise money for youth mental health charity I Am Hope. She now works part-time for the organisation. Dr. Paul Skirrow of the New Zealand College of Clinical Psychologists says stories like Lena's are all too common.
We're hearing stories of long waiting lists and in some cases waiting lists being closed for child and adolescent mental health services in particular.
And the mental health conditions people are waiting weeks or months to get treatment for are often extremely serious.
Something that's life-threatening where somebody's suicidal. Being told that, well, there's no service for you just is absolutely heartbreaking.
Dr. Skirrow says there's been a worldwide spike in demand for psychological services, due in part to the COVID pandemic, as well as economic uncertainty and the climate crisis. And New Zealand's not training enough psychologists to keep up.
It's kind of worrying for us, really, because we think there needs to be a big boost of investment and then continued investment.
In the past, Dr. Skirrow says people could reliably see a private psychologist if they had the money, but now waiting lists for these practices are backed up too. Founder of the I Am Hope charity, Mike King, says New Zealand's mental health system is too focused on crisis, rather than helping young people before they reach breaking point.
In other words, a child has to be in crisis before they can see a mental health professional. And if you're focused on crisis, all you are going to get is more crisis.
Mr. King says improving access to counselling services would help ease the load on the country's psychologists.
So what we need is a proactive model where young people can go and see a counsellor not when they're mentally unwell, they go and see a counsellor to stay well.
Lena Watt says she's too young to worry about the specifics of the system, but she's in no doubt that something needs to change.
I can't give you an exact answer when it comes to the number of psychologists or whether it's pay or whatever. I'm 18, I don't know that kind of thing. But I can tell you from a child's perspective that it's not good enough. I felt like I was completely ignored, like there was no one out there that could help me.
A Te Whatu Order spokesperson says it offers multidisciplinary teams, including psychologists, and because of this, it doesn't hold psychology-specific waitlists. It says when a person's referred to a service, they're triaged, and people who need acute care are always prioritised and seen urgently. And it says none of their child or adolescent teams have closed their waiting lists at this time.
Luca Foreman reporting there. It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The leader of the Russian mercenary group embroiled in the bloodiest fighting in Ukraine has posted a video saying they're pulling out. The battle for Bakhmut has been the longest and deadliest of the war. A once thriving city of 70,000 people is now completely devastated. Until now, troops from the Wagner group, many of them criminals from prisons, have led the fighting for Russia. But their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has sounded a withdrawal. CNN's Fred Pleitgen reports.
Just as the Ukrainian military say their forces are retaking ground on the outskirts of Bakhmut, Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin says his mercenaries are moving out. That's it, moving out in 10 to 15 minutes, he tells these tankers. Everyone leaves before June 1st, will rest, prepare, and then get a new task. Wagner's exit could mark a turning point in one of the bloodiest battles in Europe since World War II. The mercenaries assaulted Bakhmut for months, often using human waves to try and storm Ukrainian positions. Prigozhin trying to prove to Putin his hired guns can get the job done where regular Russian units fail. Even during the withdrawal, a swipe at Russia's defense minister. Prigozhin joking he'll leave two scrawny fighters behind to help the army when they take over Wagner's positions. That is Bieber and that's Dolik, he says. The moment the military are in a tough position, they'll stand up and block the Ukrainian army. Guys, don't bully the military. While the Ukrainians tell CNN they cannot confirm Wagner is really pulling out of Bakhmut, they believe a withdrawal could give them a boost in Kyiv's quest to retake the city.
Compared to other units of the Russian army, Wagner did fight better and conducted more offensive actions, but this was literally due to bloody discipline and threats of execution.
While Moscow's army struggles in Ukraine, Russians clearly feel threatened on the home front as well. The intelligence service FSB releasing dramatic footage of arrests from earlier this month of what they claim were Ukrainian intelligence operatives plotting to attack two nuclear power plants in northwestern Russia. While the Ukrainians haven't commented, Russia blames Kyiv, Moscow also lashing out after U.S. intelligence assessment saying Ukraine may have been behind a drone attack on the Kremlin in early May. Russia using the incident to justify its war against Ukraine, where Putin's top mercenary is regrouping his forces and vowing to return.
To Japan now, where it's shoring up diplomatic support before it starts releasing treated wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant. The discharge is expected to happen in the next few months, but despite assurances from the plant operator and the government, there are grave concerns from both fishermen who live near the plant and those across the Pacific. The ABC's James Oaten reports.
The Bougainville capital, Buka, may be more than 5,000 kilometres from Fukushima, but people are worried about what's about to happen in Japan. Ignatius Wama is a local fisherman.
We need to tell the Japanese government to put a stop on this. We don't want this to happen in the Pacific Ocean.
12 years ago, a tsunami destroyed the Fukushima nuclear power plant, leading to nuclear meltdowns. The plant's operators, TEPCO, have had to pump water to cool the highly radioactive melted fuel and fuel debris. Now there's 1.3 million tonnes of treated wastewater sitting in huge tanks, and TEPCO is running out of room. So it's preparing to start discharging treated water, and there's concern ocean currents could spread it for thousands of kilometres.
We are in this area where we sell fish daily, and people feed on fish daily. If the sea is damaged by this nuclear waste, it will affect us a lot.
A highly specialised filtration system removes contaminants before its planned release. What it can't remove is a radioactive form of hydrogen called tritium. But Jim Smith, a professor in environmental science from the University of Portsmouth in the UK, says the discharged water would be diluted to safe levels.
So we measure radioactivity amounts in becquerels. The planned release will be at a level of about 1,500 becquerels per litre of tritium. And that 1,500 becquerels per litre is about 7 times lower than the World Health Organization drinking water standard. So in theory, if it wasn't salty water and all the rest of it, you could drink it.
He says releasing the water is safer than keeping it stored, where it would be under threat from typhoons, earthquakes and tsunamis.
The Le Hague facility in France discharges about 450 times more tritium every year than this planned release from Fukushima. Sellafield in the UK discharges about 45 times more to the Irish Sea.
To calm concerns, South Korean officials have been given an unprecedented 6-day tour of the Fukushima plant this week. Japan is also courting Pacific Island leaders after the Secretariat of the Pacific Islands Forum criticised the planned discharge earlier this year. Mark Brown is the Cook Islands Prime Minister and now Chair of the Pacific Islands Forum.
Japan has assured us that they would not do anything that would see their food chain or the biodiversity being affected by this water.
Solomon Islands have reportedly rebuked an offer from Japan to boost maritime security due to concerns about the discharge, while Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape refused to disclose his position when approached by the ABC. Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown says Pacific leaders will be in a better position to respond after a report from the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Since the revelation of the artificial intelligence chatbot, ChatGPT, concerns about cheating have dominated the conversation in the education sector. But leading educators in Australia say it could transform classrooms for the better, and AI should be embraced. The technology is currently banned in all public schools except for South Australia, while private schools can use it. As the ABC's Connor Duffy reports, it's leading to fears of a digital divide.
Thanks for coming along to learn a bit about AI and history.
At Our Lady of Mercy College in Sydney's West, history students are learning how cutting-edge technology can transform even the oldest of disciplines. Year 12 student Arlene Kumar is a huge fan.
For my historical investigation, I'm talking about my, family and the history of indentured servitude coming from Fiji as well as Mauritius. Uncovering the history of my family through artificial intelligence is really incredible and it's fascinating.
She says the hunt for the killer quotes and sources that make a great history essay takes just minutes with AI instead of hours with Google.
It saves us a lot of time, especially us students in Year 12, where, time is money. Time is money, and, we need all the time we have.
Arlene's history teacher, Matt Esterman, says it's also great for educators.
It's actually taking human knowledge and the stuff we've put together as a civilization almost and representing it to us.
Mr Esterman is an early adopter and in 2 minutes demonstrates to AM how the chatbot comes up with a lesson plan that might otherwise take an hour. A big saving for overworked teachers.
They're pretty good. So like most responses and chatting with colleagues around Australia and around the world, you sort of say, oh, that's pretty impressive, but it doesn't quite get there. I'm sure it will in years to come, but it does sort of 50, 60, whatever % of the job, and you still have to put your own flair into it, you still have to put your own context into it.
Generative AI is currently banned for public school students everywhere except for South Australia, but has been embraced at private schools. Experts are warning the dual policies could exacerbate a digital divide and would like education ministers to reconsider when they next meet in July. Professor Sam Seller is a Dean of Research at the University of South Australia.
Banning it isn't going to be sustainable. We've got a responsibility as educators to be working out how best to use these tools to improve our teaching.
Professor Seller just co-authored a chapter in a book published overseas on the opportunities ChatGPT presents in the classroom. He says it'll be so transformative it could make standardised tests like NAPLAN redundant and allow teachers as well as students to focus on higher order learning.
ChatGPT forces us to ask that question because it shows us how basic skills can be easily replicated by machines. And so it encourages us to think about teaching more complex skills.
As experts and leaders grapple with difficult choices, so too are students like Arlene Kumar.
We do still need to be careful about AI and how we use it because, there's not really an end to it. At least I don't know that there's an end to it.
A high school concert band in Florida got the surprise of a lifetime when singer Ed Sheeran turned up at the school practice. He's in Tampa ahead of a sold-out concert. At first, the students were too focused on their music to notice the singer was standing in front of them.
Thanks so much, guys. I thought I'd come and play some songs for you. I've also brought some guitars to give to you guys for the music department. And I'm playing a sold-out stadium tomorrow, but I've got tickets for all of you guys to come. But, tomorrow's to like 72,000 people, and right here, I'm going to play a tiny concert now, if that's okay. And I found a love for me, darling, just dive right in, follow my lead, and I found a girl.
And the surprise appearance of Ed Sheeran comes weeks after he was cleared in a copyright court case after being accused of ripping off Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. Well, finally tonight, as the days get colder, there won't be many of us still diving into the pool or the ocean. But in Canada, there's a Boston Terrier that wants to swim all year round. CNN's Jenny Moose has the story of the pooch who's taking doggy paddling to new heights.
Think of him as a pool puppy. Thor, the Boston Terrier, loves swimming so much, he got his own indoor pool.
He loves to jump. That's like his favorite thing to do would be to jump in the pool.
Boston Terriers are not natural swimmers, but Thor started young, plunging into lakes in British Columbia, Canada, wearing a life jacket. Soon he graduated to his own outdoor pool. Even though he hates to be out in the rain, he eats it up when he's in the pool. But owner Lisa Mazurek says it was always sad when outdoor swimming season came to an end, so she and her partner converted an old garage into a pool house for a pup. This was his first dip. Now he swims at least twice a day, squeaking every time he jumps in.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Always swimming in circles. And how many laps can he do?
roughly about like 300 laps when he's out there.
Occasionally he uses his duck floaty. He's got his own Thor towel. Why do they spoil him?
Because of that face.
Though Thor doesn't know it, he has an audience most evenings at 7.
We'll go live on TikTok because people, for some reason, really love to watch him swim.
How many dogs would make this choice?
Bacon? Or the pool? No, the bacon. For the pool.
But this is a dog that can swim and chew bacon at the same time.
Do you want the bacon in the pool?
Oh my goodness, he is such a delight, if only for some of his enthusiasm. Thor the Brown Boston on TikTok if you want to watch him swimming live. It is an absolute delight. A lot of you have got in touch about potholes. This one says there are huge random potholes all over the place around Auckland, especially around those out of control, ugly building sites. And this one, I hit 3 consecutive unmarked potholes in the dark and rain between Rotorua and Paengaroa. Did $800 of damage, not to mention the hairy job of changing the tyre on a sketchy part of the road in the dark and rain. There has to be accountability somewhere, otherwise no incentive to change, that person says. Now, that is about all we have got time for this evening. Our late news team will keep you updated throughout the night, as always, so do stay tuned. And if you missed anything from the program, you can always find us, Checkpoint, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Do have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you again on Monday. Be careful on the roads and watch out for potholes.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. A law professor says the justice system is designed to accept new evidence, and it's a concern that Crown Law appeared to ignore the fact there were fresh questions over Alan Hall's murder conviction. The Public Service Minister says the work looking at redress for the survivors of abuse and care is complex and needs as many voices as possible to make sure it gets it right. The union representing nurses is calling a number of stop work meetings next week to discuss their latest pay offer. And health officials are pleased with the turnout at an immunisation and health screening drive in Hamilton today. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country Life this week meets an aeroplane pilot who swapped the high city flying life for an acre or two.
We didn't cash up out of Auckland and make millions of money to come down here. It was just a lifestyle choice.
Now with his feet on the ground, he's put his hands in the soil, growing lavender.
It's all a voyage of discovery, really. Yeah, like I said, I've got the best smelling man shed in town, So
Country Life, Friday nights and Saturday mornings, right after the news at 7 or wherever you get your podcast.
Hello, you're with me, Evie Ashton, through until 7 o'clock. It's time for Trending Now. And first up, we have Focus on Politics.
Kia ora, ko Annika Smith aho. Anei te pūrongo tō rangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. About 5 kilometres north of the very top of Australia's territory lies the diverse island nation of Papua New Guinea. It's the world's 3rd largest island country, the largest Pacific nation by population, and the centre of a geopolitical power struggle. On a muggy Sunday evening, New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Hipkins touches down in its capital, Port Moresby. Welcomed by a sprawling red carpet, dozens of armed troops and a familiar national anthem. It's Mr Hipkins' first time in Papua New Guinea, or PNG, and his first chance to catch up with his Pacific counterparts, starting with PNG Prime Minister James Marape.
Mr. Minister, how are you? My sincere apologies for starting our meeting, breakfast meeting very late. You had a good rest?
I have indeed, thank you. I have indeed. Yeah.
The pair meet over breakfast just a few hours before Papua New Guinea is set to sign a security deal with the United States. And Mr Hipkins leaves with, in his words, greater clarity about what PNG wants out of the deal.
We had a conversation about that. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that this is not new territory for Papua New Guinea. They have existing security relationships with the United States. And this isn't just about security. It extends to a range of other things, including, electrification and so on. So I would see this more of an extension of an existing relationship.
The Security Pact goes well beyond a deeper bilateral relationship. As one academic puts it, it's about as big as the South Pacific gets, giving American forces uninhibited access to PNG's territorial land, waters and airspace in exchange for roughly $45 million worth of development programs. And it's not being welcomed by everyone. Hundreds of university students march against the signing of the pact during the leaders' meetings. Concern the deal is being driven by geopolitics rather than progressing PNG's domestic interests. "20 minutes inland, another crowd of several thousand gathers to see Mr Hipkins at Gordon's Market. Built with funding from the New Zealand government, the market is now an established facility for locals to buy and sell fruit and vegetables. Augustine Wariki leans on a nearby railing. He's a sailor based in Port Moresby and proudly tells me his work has taken him to New Zealand, docking in both Whangarei and Auckland. Do you like New Zealand?
It's a beautiful country. And we are thankful of New Zealand government spent 15 million on this market, which really helped the people of Port Moresby and the Central Province as a whole, which it really suits our needs.
Mr Wariki competes with the bustling market noise and then loudspeaker to tell me there's no shortage of problems in PNG.
Main issues are like we need enough job, create a lot of technical college which they can have technical trades, and especially the things are growing up in the cities, but the development has to go to the rural areas where the people live, which will stop them from coming flushing to town and to the other activities like farming and whatever things that can really sustain their lives.
Are you worried about China and the US in the Pacific?
Yes, because China, as far as we know, it's a communist country like now they have war between Ukraine and Russia. Like China, if they happen to step in, it's one of the big country. It's a powerful country too. So if they come and attack with our neighbor Solomon Islands, it's quite risky for us. So we do care about that. I mean, the Chinese, they do a lot of business in Papua New Guinea, but our safety has to be guaranteed.
Further along the railing, another man says jobs or the lack of them are top of mind.
The big issue is unemployment rate. Because most of the people they don't employ, they don't work in the private or companies or government sectors because of the limited jobs. Therefore, most of the people they live by selling their fresh produce.
Asked if people are concerned about the militarisation of the Pacific, he says most people are just living day to day.
I don't think most of the people feel like the security threat because of the, most of the people, they are uneducated. So they don't know the influence of the, developed countries, the influence towards us. Therefore, they just do the normal day-to-day living. They don't care about who's influencing us, whether China or US.
Papua New Guinea, like many developing countries, needs investment in education, jobs, healthcare and infrastructure, and China has been delivering it. This has been going on for years, but a security pact between Beijing and Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea's neighbour, put competing superpowers on notice. Shrouded in secrecy, it prompted concern from neighbouring countries it would lead to a Chinese military presence in the Pacific. The former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, described it as gravely concerning at the time. The United States has since made a concerted effort to re-establish its presence in the Pacific, with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken travelling